was founded to catalyze partnerships in our community. We have an amazing concentration of nonprofits, businesses, academic institutions, and foundations within our community here in the Seattle region that do international development. And we have amazing examples for you today on some of these NGO and business partnerships. You'll hear later today a partnership between Microsoft and Mercy Corps and Costco and TechnoServe. But I want to point out that the word partnership does not have one definition. There's a range of partnerships. It could be a monetary donation that's more transactional between a company and a nonprofit, or it could be a partnership where there's no funding involved, and that it was really two organizations coming together to co-create a new program for social good. You'll hear about this full range today in the plenary and in the breakout sessions. So whether you're a small nonprofit or a large company, our goal for you today is to leave the conference with new knowledge and new connections that will advance your work. It's so great to see so many Global Washington members in the room, and if you're not a member, come talk to me later. Before we get started, though, I want to thank our sponsors. First, we have Microsoft, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Seattle International Foundation, Waldron, FSG, you can cheer, FSG, Global Good, Mercy Corps, and PATH, Landesa, Pacific Continental, and World Vision, Crosscut, and Humanisphere are our media partners. So thank you all for the sponsorship for today's event. And if you happen to look in your attendee bag, you'll notice that Theo Chocolate is also one of our in-kind sponsors. You all have chocolate in your bag for us today. The other in-kind sponsor is Tagboard, which is collecting all the tweets. And we do encourage people to do social media today. We're at hashtag GW Conference 2015. Should be 2016, actually. It's 2016. And the Wi-Fi is winter 2016. So it's been an amazing year for Global Washington, and I'm not going to go through an annual report and tell you all the details, but I do want to mention two things that I'm very proud of. One is that this year, Global Washington published the 2016 Global Philanthropy Guide. And this guide profiles 10 Global Washington members and then also lists all of Global Washington members as a member directory. This was done in partnership with the Seattle International Foundation and the Seattle Foundation. It's being used right now with people who have a donor-advised fund at the Seattle Foundation. And tomorrow, it's going to be handed out to everyone at the Women of the World event, which are donors coming to an event for the Seattle International Foundation as well. So this is just another way that Global Washington is promoting our members and trying to increase philanthropy for international issues. The other item that Global Washington is doing right now is we're creating a report with community attributes and really trying to catalog this amazing community that we have and look at the depth and breadth of all the organizations based in our region doing international work. We're also in this report looking at a benchmark for international philanthropy to find out if our region is really giving to international issues. We've just begun this report, and I want to thank you all, those of you that have done some interviews and have filled out our member survey for this report. And I want to talk about just a few findings that we have, just initial findings that I think are really interesting. One is that several people in the interviews mentioned that we have an entrepreneurial spirit here in Washington State. And you can see that as it reflected in the NGOs that we have, the way we do international development, and in the giving practices. Others have said that our region is known for our global ties. We are the most trade-dependent state in the nation, and we have well-known international businesses. However, our businesses are not known for their international philanthropy as much, and they should be. Businesses also could benefit from being recognized as leaders in global giving because it also helps with attracting new employees and for employee retention. Many have said that the Seattle region is really being known as the hub for global development, but we have to talk about it more. In the Northwest, we have this culture of being modest, and Global Washington really wants us to brag a little bit more, both within our state and externally, and be proud of the fact that we are the hub for global development. Lastly, several people noted that there are strong collaborations happening right now among organizations in our region, but there's much more to be had. So this report will be done early next year, and we'll come out with more findings after that. The other thing that we've been working on is a video to promote our members. And we're, again, in the initial phases of that, but I want to show you the lead-in for this video and talk a little bit more about our members. It's a short video, but we are going to dim the lights, so hopefully you've had your coffee. So let me show you the video, and we'll come back and talk about it after. So great to see all those photos. The footage is actually from our Global Washington members, and I want to just name them off and thank them again for collaborating on this video. Adara, Awamaki, Global Partnerships, Malaria No More, PATH, Sahar, Splash, and Women's Enterprises International. So you'll probably also see the producers of this video, White Noise Production, are here today to also get some footage and do some interviews, so you'll probably see them throughout the day. We also have Rainmakers TV, which is doing some video for an online journal and pulling people aside for interviews. So, and we also have a camera here today for our internal purposes as well, so lots of cameras. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our first keynote discussion. As they come up, I'm not going to read their full biographies. You have them, the biographies in your program, but I do want to say a few things. First, we'll start with Mary Snapp, who's the Corporate Vice President and President of Microsoft Philanthropies. Mary has been at Microsoft for 27 years and joined as the first female attorney. I've heard also, because of her long tenure and her position, that she's very well respected throughout the company. Mary became the head of philanthropy just about a year ago, so we're excited to hear from her today to see how the past year has been and what she has planned for the future. Next, we have Michael Bowers, who's the Vice President of Humanitarian Leadership and Response at Mercy Corps. And Michael leads all the Mercy Corps' global emergency response and preparedness. And he's also held positions stationed in Afghanistan, Albania, Croatia, and Kyrgyzstan. I asked him yesterday where he was based, and he said, honestly, I feel like my home base is on Emirates Airlines right now because of all his travel. So, very good, very good. So we're honored to have him today, too. Lauren Woodman is going to be our moderator today, and she's the CEO of NetHope, which advances the use of technology for humanitarian issues. Lauren has a degree in foreign policy and worked at the UN, but has also spent more than a decade at Microsoft. I believe that it's partially due to Lauren's leadership that NetHope actually recently announced that Seattle is going to be their home base. They've been a virtual organization for several years, and now they're calling Seattle home, which we're very happy about.
It's great too.
So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lauren for our conversation.
Thank you, Kristen. And thanks everybody for being here today. This should be a really interesting conversation. And certainly from a NetHope perspective, much of the work that we do is based on partnerships. So I'm really looking forward to hearing not only what Mary and Michael have to say to us today, but also to hear sort of how the conversation throughout the day and in all of the different breakouts goes. So Mary, let me start with you. You've been at Microsoft Philanthropies for a year now.
Right.
You've been traveling around talking with folks inside the company and outside the company especially. What have you learned? How has your thinking evolved?
Thanks, Lauren. I am going to take just 5 or 10 minutes to talk about Microsoft Philanthropies and my thinking, but I do have to say, let's see what's going to happen here. Great. I do have to say that all of this about the first female lawyer, it was Bill Neukom who hired me all those years ago. He was the one who took a chance back then to make that decision on behalf of the legal department of the company, so I am forever grateful to him for that. Microsoft Philanthropies really follows the broad vision of the company to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And as I took the role a year ago, that was really a daunting vision, but I have to say I am really enjoying it. What surprised me, a couple of things really surprised me. As I've told the members of my team, you get a lot more, people hug you a lot more in Microsoft Philanthropies than they do when you're a lawyer. You know, it's so not unusual to get a hug, you know, after knowing someone for 30 minutes. You know, it's just really refreshing. I think, you know, one other thing that sort of, that really, I don't think it surprised me, but it's been really gratifying, is that it is really intellectually quite a stimulating responsibility to have this job. And as much as I thought that I was really intellectually engaged by indemnification agreements and secondary liability and copyright law, I'm much more engaged in reading the kinds of things that I do today across areas of youth and education and across humanitarian areas. And the books on my nightstand are quite different. I am, you know, reading books on race relations. I'm reading books on educational reform. I'm reading books on sort of long-term history of poor in America, for example. And it's just been really, you know, wonderful to make that transition. So as we think about Microsoft and the age of information coming forward, one of the key things is to ensure that we actually don't leave people further behind by the move forward in the fourth industrial revolution, in fact, than they already are today. And so we think about that on behalf of the company and on behalf of the work that we do. And our work tends to focus in 4 areas, which will evolve over time. It's also one of the great things. We think that the particular mission that Philanthropies has across the company's broad mission is to bring the benefits of technology and the skills to use the technology to the people who need them most. And as we think about that, one of the big areas for us is nonprofits. We think it's absolutely incredibly important to build the capacity of nonprofits to use technology. Because if nonprofits use technology, we think that they can better serve their beneficiaries. They can use technology and data to solve some problems that we may not have been able to approach before. So we can talk a little bit later about some of the programs that we have to really benefit and build out what we call a modern nonprofit. The second area, not surprisingly, is youth. And we have a number of programs focused on young people between the ages of 16 and 24 with our Youth Spark program, where we reach youth in about 55 different countries, primarily relying on partnerships with about 100 nonprofits. And the partnership is absolutely key to deliver this. The third area that we broadly think about and are just starting to think about is the area of accessibility. It has been an area that our CEO, Satya Nadella, has a strong passion for. And in collaboration with our corporate and social responsibility groups, we're trying to identify ways in which we can tell the broad corporate story and make our products better all the time, and at the same time develop good relationships with nonprofits who are doing very creative things in this area. And the final area is humanitarian, and I know that will be the focus of a lot of our discussion today. I'm really proud of the work that the team, and Jane Messick in particular, has done over the last year to build out our program from just natural man-made disasters to a more broad-based response, holistic response to humanitarian. So as I think about what do we do and how do we bring the support that we have, we want to bring the best assets that we have to the table. And we think technology is one of those. We think it's a differentiator for us. And we are really trying to get people to the cloud. So Office 365 and Azure, and we've expanded our technology grant programs to include those products. We have a lot available on our website at no cost, and then we have a grant program for technology as well. A second area is the cash, and I will be the first to tell you that we probably don't provide as much cash as maybe some other very large corporations. We have a very strong employee program where we match employees up to $15,000 a year in the United States, and we'll talk more about that. But that really goes to truly, tens of thousands of organizations. And in addition to that, we provide cash grants to the partners that we work with on a close basis as well. Our employees, so proud of the work that our employees do. In addition to their own contribution of about $65 million a year to nonprofits that the company matches, last year they also donated well over $500,000 in volunteer hours. And we're really trying to drive that employee volunteer to much more skills-based, and talk more about that later if people are interested. And the final area that I think that I love to talk about actually is the advocacy. Because we are not a separate organization, we work within the company and as part of the company, we are able to take positions on issues like migration, on issues like education reform, and talk about legislative change along with our philanthropy without fear of running afoul of regulations or being worried about where those lines are. And that kind of advocacy is important. The other piece of advocacy that I think is really important that I really love working with the business on is social good marketing. And we actually have a program running right now on Bing. Got to go out to Bing. We've got the 30 days in December, and we are highlighting individual nonprofits on some of those days. And I think Mercy Corps was maybe December 2nd's date. And you can still find it. So we love to do that social good marketing with our great nonprofits. So I think I'll stop there. I'll look forward to all your hugs when we leave the stage, and turn it back over to Lauren.
Thank you, Mary. It's fascinating to see how Microsoft Philanthropies has evolved in just a short year under your leadership, and I look forward to diving into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Michael, Mercy Corps has been around for 30 years. You've done a lot of work in the humanitarian space and some subset of that. Tell us a little bit about where Mercy Corps is focused now, and given all the places you've been, what do you see happening in the humanitarian space?
Great, thanks, Lauren. Well, first of all, thanks to Mary for giving me permission to hug a lawyer at Microsoft Philanthropies, because Mercy Corps is a hugging organization.
They all are.
Culturally,
You
I think
all are.
the partnership is already very strong there. So thank you. And thank you to Global Washington for inviting Mercy Corps up on the stage today. I just wanted to quickly add, for those of you who aren't familiar enough yet with Mercy Corps, we are a leading global organization. We empower people around the world to survive through crises, to build better lives, and transform their communities through good. So that's a fairly, hopefully, clear statement to make on who we are and what we do. Our mission basically is to meet the urgent needs of today, Lauren, as well as looking towards what's a stronger future for people. So it's the today and the tomorrow, and I think that's where also Microsoft comes into play with Mercy Corps. We really value those organizations that we work with that both meet that urgent need for the today and work on tomorrow, especially with youth. You know, with Mercy Corps, essentially, we're looking at two storms coming together in the world. One is of conflict, and the other, of course, is of displacement. And I think this is a very informed audience, but it is important to say that basically, we're looking at over 65 million people displaced in today's world. This is an unprecedented number of people. It's roughly the size of France, if you can think of it that way. 34,000 people are displaced daily, currently, and over 1 million people are awaiting resettlement, basically globally. And as we know in this country, refugee resettlement can be a very controversial topic on the political stage. So for Mercy Corps, what we're really striving to do right now is answer those questions and bring other partners to bear on how do we provide solutions in that kind of conflict and displacement mix. Conflict now is the biggest driver of poverty and, in fact, injustice in the world. The World Bank has recognized this, so we're looking at a paradigm where, though development gains are being made globally in many places, and the UN has recently adopted, along with the member states, brand new sustainable development goals to continue to reach globally, we're looking at basically that last mile of individuals in the world that are surrounded by conflict. So I'm very happy to hear comments such as Mary's, when partners are looking at the spectrum of need in today's world. It's not just natural disasters, and obviously those still play a major role in humanitarian action and preparedness and resiliency that goes into mitigating that. But we're really looking also at how do we get to the root causes of conflict. And for Mercy Corps, our working assumption is that is through a combination of many things. One is, and I had a great conversation with Bill the other day about, you know, where is the rule of law and good governance in many of our development strategies and many of our humanitarian action strategies. That can also involve where is the role of peace building. And that's fallen out of fashion, frankly, in the last 20 years in the time I've been involved in this industry. And this isn't simply just sort of small conflict mitigation work or conflict resolution, but it's really laddering it up into that environment where we're seeing both gains lost in the governance model and gains lost in economic development and growth. And when you couple that with people losing a sense of justice and fairness and transparency and accountability in their systems, that's a perfect cauldron for where we're in right now. And you can see that, of course, very dramatically and tragically in Syria right now, which is one of the greatest generators of refugees in the world. So our focus is primarily looking at how do we, as an organization, construct technologies with partners and support through other organizations that address not only the displacement of people, and in particular youth, but also where do we bring some of these more complicated solutions on good governance and rule of law and economic development and growth, because there is an equity divide out there for sure in terms of the have and have-nots. And I totally agree where Mary is focusing on that youth question. And for us, that cohort of almost 10 to 24-year-olds are a critical piece. If you look at their role even in the Middle East, the largest demographic in the Middle East is youth and that youth bulge. And yet they offer incredible opportunities and strength. And we saw that with Microsoft when we worked with refugee learning centers in Greece and Turkey last year and the coming year. And we think that's where our best chances of investments is in our youth strategies, both in recognizing their own opportunities and strengths and giving them the capacities and the abilities to sort of fulfill their own ambitions, and frankly working with their most urgent needs, as many of them are displacing due to forced conflict. So that sort of quadrant of work where partnerships land, and I hope we can talk more about that with Microsoft, is a critical piece of our future trend in what we do. And they obviously offer the best solutions because they're the change agents of their own making. And so there is hope out there, and there is optimism with them. And I was in Lesbos last year at this time, more or less a few times, and though it's a perilous journey, fraught with many unknowns, they still were incredibly optimistic on what they were doing and why they were making those choices, which were very hard to make. So we look forward to the conversation and next few minutes on how we can further elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me follow up a little bit on the relationship between Mercy Corps and Microsoft, because you guys have explored some interesting partnership together to address some of these issues. Michael, you want to give us a brief overview, and then Mary, maybe I'll ask you to sort of fill in on how Microsoft came to that conversation?
Right. Well, I think we've been a partner with Microsoft for a long time, actually.
Decades.
And it's a little bit like reading a history book of different actions that we've had over the years, both financial and intellectual. And I think the employee sort of spirit that we've engaged with is sort of that next frontier that really we also are very excited about. So obviously what we look at in partnerships with groups like Microsoft are what's the 360 in that role with them. So it's not just a bilateral transaction of a grant or maybe even a specific project in one area. For us, we're looking for how can Microsoft and how can we help them work on the issues of both impact, where can we have greater impact with the resources we have, the technology and the people, where can we work on impacting influence makers in the world. Microsoft is an incredible organization, and the name brand and the power they bring with their people allow for that influence. And then for us, where is innovation still with our partnership, and where do we go with innovation? It's a very easy thing to say and not always easy to kind of play out in the field. And in many ways, that's that iteration role we really want to have in that 360 relationship where we try and fail, or we fail and we succeed and seed and sort of build out. One of the innovations that we were working on in the Mediterranean last year was sort of a mobile capacity for refugees to have information on the go. And the distinctive change with this kind of mass migration for an organization like Mercy Corps is we will only see these people for 5 to 10 minutes, perhaps, maybe even a little bit longer. That is a big paradigm shift change from past refugee assistance work, where basically we're with them for several years, in fact. So the technology that we need to help provide them on the move is an incredible, important thing to work on. And sort of where do we innovate with groups like Microsoft on how to build that out, or even work on, if we're collaborating on a learning center for refugee youth, what does that mean? So I think for us, it's that influence, impact, and innovation that we most value with Microsoft.
Yeah, I love that 360 look, because I think that's how we think about it as well. And for us, it's really important that we have an alignment on a mission together, and the youth alignment and our growing focus on humanitarian, really aligns really closely with the mission of Mercy Corps. But the ability to grow the relationship and to work with an organization that has scale is also important. So if I think about the work that we did, a couple of years ago in the area of humanitarian, it truly was just focused on natural disasters and earthquakes and tsunamis and, sudden onset. As horrible as they were really not even reaching most of the conflict areas or any of the conflict areas. And so as we looked to build that work out, we reached out to Mercy Corps because Mercy Corps is one of the leaders in the area. And we approached it with the learning that we had a year or so ago. And we talked about our technology and we talked about our employee donations. But what we came to realize more and more was that we could offer with our technology a lot more than what we had traditionally offered by providing Office and Office 365 to the laptops of aid workers and those working few who are working in offices. And so we've really tried to bring newer technologies, like working with NetHope, along with Mercy Corps, to bring some TV white spaces in place so that we can have that Wi-Fi hotspot connectivity. And as the crisis has evolved, and we do realize that there will be people in place now for long periods of time, we've evolved to think about how can we use Azure and those kinds of data technologies to help identify needs, and frankly, how can we provide some support in community centers or in camps where there are refugees and where people will be for long periods of time. We approached this, frankly, I'll say it was probably a bit naively in the beginning, and we talked about bringing digital skills and IT literacy and those kinds of things And that makes sense in a situation where people have already been there 5 or 7 years and there is a routine. In these situations, some of the youth that we saw and that we learned about have come with such psychosocial issues that we have learned that we probably need to partner earlier on with some programs to deal with youth and conflict before we can put, a young person in a classroom to learn IT skills. So I'm very excited about the growing work that we are doing with Mercy Corps and others in that psychosocial area as well. Learning through sports or other activities how to address conflict, and then putting an IT program or a digital literacy program towards the end of the day or the end of the program. So that is learning for us. And being able to work with a partner who has a deep understanding, 30 years in the field, has just been really, really important for us as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think on that youth angle, again, and I really appreciate your framing of that, it's that well-being concentric circle that, as part of that psychosocial, there's life skills for many of these youth that have been displaced now for 5-6 years, in addition to understanding where they fit now in the world. And so we really look at it as holistically as we can, both from a physiological point of view, as you said, because actually their brains have changed fundamentally due to trauma. And so we have to do that in a very, very smart way, and we need so many partners to help us understand those dimensions and learning through that. So I think Microsoft is a great example of that, because there are pieces to the puzzle that we can't do alone as an organization. We certainly have to go out.
Yeah, I'm just so in awe of the time that you have spent, outside of the United States, seeing things firsthand. I've just begun to do some of that, and we'll do more. And I've told the team, I recently visited, I was in Morocco, and I went out to visit a youth detention center. It was about an hour outside of Marrakesh. And people are worried in Morocco about youth radicalization and growing issues of conflict as well. And this is potentially a political statement, but I will just say that, this sense that some of us in the country have about nativism and nationalism doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So as I drove out that mile out and saw, really, really poor communities, they all had satellite dishes on top of the buildings. So they see the world around them. So not only are they exposed to conflict, but they see other people who have lives much different than their own. And the need, to reach young people across the world in that age band, in those situations of tension and strife, I think has never been greater.
You both have spoken about the really sort of multifaceted and very complicated and interconnected ways that these conflicts have created, where we might have approached just really sort of basic human needs 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. We're looking at a much more comprehensive approach. And I think that reflects a change in the thinking of the way that we think about responding to humanitarian needs. Mary, you've spoken about how your thinking has changed over the last year as you've come into this role and seen and learned more. And Michael, I'm sure, from our conversation last night even, how your thinking has changed over the years in different places that you've been. I think the nature of partnerships has also changed. And you guys have both highlighted two important things around aligned missions and sort of looking at that 360 view. But we know that partnerships are hard, and we know they're really, really difficult sometimes to make successful. What do you think are some of the other sort of key characteristics of what makes a successful partnership? If you're a nonprofit or a company thinking about entering into a partnership, what are some of the things that we should be aware of in thinking about that?
I would say one of the first things, and it's no surprise, I'm sure, to anyone in this room, is that you still have to establish those personal relationships where you can learn together and have people who are on both sides dedicated not only to their mission, but dedicated to connecting with each other. So I would say we probably have about 100 partnerships that we go deeper on. And we essentially have, we divide those up, and it's almost like an account manager relationship. And our Microsoft Philanthropies people, understand that particular nonprofit. And Mercy Corps is a great example. I would say over the years for us, an organization like the Boys and Girls Club of America, that's another one where we've been well over a decade. And we started in one place, and you end up today in a very different place in terms of thinking about the needs of the organization. Quite frankly, they're addressing some of the same youth issues that Mercy Corps is outside the United States in some of the very urban areas. And we're engaged in a long-term partnership with them as they become much more also knowledgeable about stress and livelihood issues. And I think that one-on-one relationship with a match is absolutely key. It's no surprise, really.
Yeah.
You probably have a few others to add, Michael.
Oh, and I think many people in the room know this, but it's the honesty, too, to be very faithful to what's happening right now with us and with the partner. And, it's just being very transparent with the challenges. The operational context that we're talking about actually is not a piece of cake, of course. And so just being very upfront and that kind of fluid communication with the partner, I think truly does make a solid relationship. So rather than obscuring the fact that we've been through 4 country directors in Yemen for the last year, which I'll openly say it to everyone in truthfulness, and just letting the partner know that we're just having a hard time with our leadership model,
and that takes a lot of trust,
and that takes trust, and you got to be able to be a place to do that. So you're honestly describing those challenges. And then I think that the other thing that's really distinctively different, which I always took for granted, was the value of that employee engagement, how important that is for the philanthropy as well as the corporation perhaps, but and how hard that is to get right where you can, so that the more communication, the more trust you have on how that can work in the partnership is pretty critical. And that requires advanced thinking, right? So the biggest challenge we have typically in the past as well as now is a big event occurs, a humanitarian catastrophe, say, and there's a lot of outpouring, say a lot of employee pressure at Microsoft, let's do something. Well, our teams are fully flat out, right, working on that response. So trying to engineer those things in a compressed amount of time is never the best opportunity. So working in advance on what are the key underlying issues that may help us enable a better, more responsible response with that partner is pretty critical.
Yeah, and I'd had actually just 2 more things. The employee engagement one I think is really interesting, and it's really tough to get right. Because employees are pretty independent people, especially at Microsoft, and they have, they are really interested in the causes they're interested in, and we work with them across a variety of things. But we would really love to turn our employees more into sort of skills-based, and we have been doing a little bit of work with that with the hackathons. Everybody, it's the bright, shiny word, I know. But we have started a program in the last couple of years called 1 Week. Actually, Satya began it for employees to really take 3 days away to identify a project that they wanted to work on, to recruit other volunteers at Microsoft, and then we set up tents and connectivity and all kinds of other technological support on our campus for 3 days. This last year, we had 400 of those hacks, which were in the Hack for Good category. And some of them were just, a wild-eyed idea that might be great or, it may not. They ranged from identifying sex trafficking on the internet to helping somebody do a better intake form. But we this year did something different. We partnered with 40 nonprofits who came to our campus and pitched a project. And those 40 nonprofits then worked side by side with the individuals who came to Hack to work on a project together. And a number of those employees are following forward on their own with those nonprofits. So when you talk about employee engagement, it's sort of a, you curate and you guide, but ultimately, you have to get that employee really excited about the work. And it takes more time than the nonprofit typically thinks that it
Yeah.
does, to kind of manage, because that's a relationship
That's
to
right.
manage too.
That's right.
But we're really excited about what we might be able to do. We've done really quick things like micro-volunteering, where we come across about 100 PCs, for example, that are slightly used that we want to provide to an organization, and we've done a 90-minute pizza over the lunch hour. Employees come, do the wipe and reload, and then we're able to send them out the door. We're learning from that, how to do that in a faster way too. So that employee thing, I think, is really, there's a lot of promise, but it's also, it will take time,
It'll take time,
to build
yeah.
out. The other thing, which is maybe not something that, it's a tension between nonprofits and donors, and I'll just sort of say it right out, and that's this question of metrics and accountability, and what sort of information a donor wants back from nonprofits about the work that they're doing. And I think that's something that you just also have to address honestly as well. If a nonprofit is doing metrics for 10 different organizations that are wildly different, it's highly inefficient and unlikely to be a productive exercise. On the other hand, for some of our work with youth, we would really love to know that 50% of the youth being trained in some fashion are young girls. We would love to know what numbers are for reaching youth who are underserved and defined in different ways. Those are difficult metrics sometimes to get, but I think they're important for us to be able to assess success as well. Having said that, it is a two-way street, and we do need feedback from the nonprofits about what is doable and how we can help provide better metrics along the way too. We know that we cannot overwhelm nonprofits with our accountability. Microsoft, we're big on numbers and accountability, and we have to watch that, but there is a balance and a tension there.
And I'll just quickly add, I totally agree. I think we have 189 indicators right now.
All from us?
No. Oh, good. So the key is in that dialogue with groups like Microsoft and partners are, what are the outcomes and impact indicators of those 189 or whatever that really matter? What's the value that really matters in that partnership to look at success and the so what's? Because we can all provide output indicators, right? So we are aligned, I think, very well, Mary, with that philosophy as well. And again, not an easy path all the time, but it definitely is very important for us for impact. It's so critical to see how well we're doing and what's accountable. Yeah, I agree.
You both have mentioned in different ways over the course of this conversation a word we like to use a lot in the tech industry around innovation. And without diving into this sometimes amorphous world of what is innovation, I want to ask a somewhat specific question, because I think it speaks to this notion of an open partnership and a trust and a communication. The Syrian refugee crisis is really unlike anything we've seen in the past. And Michael, as you said in your opening comments, this notion of migration and displacement has changed over the last couple of years, and I think the current refugee crisis really highlights it. Can you speak a little bit to what kinds of changes you do see, and how does that put pressure on the existing relationships we have? And then Mary, I'll ask you to respond to, how does Microsoft incorporate that thinking and think about how you evolve your response as well?
Well, without getting too technical, the dilemmas there, or the challenges, are twofold. One is it's mass migration nowadays, rather than just one conflict producing, say, 10,000 people that may displace over a border or not. We're actually talking in the millions. So the actual volume, sustained volume, and this also includes Central America, it's just not the Middle East, and also North Africa. Actually, most deaths this year over the Mediterranean occur from people leaving Libya to go to Italy, for instance. So it's the number of people and the volume of people that is a significant change. The other, and it's a little bit of a counterbalance, is they're displacing for longer. So in 1990s, people, when they became refugees or even IDPs, internally displaced persons, would probably be displaced on an average 9 years. Now it's 26 years. So that is a generational sort of issue that we're dealing with. And in that spectrum, they're urbanizing. So most refugees and IDPs are going to cities because that's where jobs are. We see that with just the fourth industrial revolution and general industrialization of economies and urbanization. So they're in cities, and cities are much harder, believe me, to work with in and work around and partner with than, say, outside of a rural area. In Athens alone, when I met the mayor last year, you're dealing with the politics of that city, right? You're dealing with the perceptions of the citizens of that city, in addition to actually how do you target services efficiently, given that they're in apartment buildings and et cetera. So those characteristics, the volume, the duration of displacement and the urbanization are big changers, and that's where we actually need to up our game and help change our profile.
Yeah, and we've been thoughtful about some of those issues too. I mean, nobody knows the answers to all of those issues, but you know, the issues in Lebanon, which is still very chaotic, and the issues in Germany are quite different. One of the things that, you know, as we've started to think about community centers too, you know, even within a country, it's very different. So, you know, we've come to understand that for a refugee to successfully integrate in Germany, you have to learn to speak German. It is really a much different cultural thing there than, you know, potentially in some other places. And we dusted off an app that we had done about 10 years ago called Schlaumause. And it's a little application with a little mouse, a storybook little mouse, that teaches young children who are speaking Arabic to speak German. That has had tremendous success in Germany. People are very excited about that, and that's sort of a case of kind of going back to something. But the other thing I think about with the urbanization too, an area that we have not played in, but I hope that companies will come together at some point to support issues around policy enabling migrants to actually get jobs and take jobs and receive benefits associated with those jobs. And that exists in only very limited ways in a few countries, Germany, Sweden, but very restricted. And so I think with the urbanization, we have to really approach these policy issues in a quite different way. What we've learned is that when we go into the urbanized areas, we really can't talk about our programs as only positively impacting refugees. There are often countries in which youth unemployment, setting aside the refugee situation, is like 20%, 30%, 40%. So the programs have to be able to be delivered broadly, or you know, we lose the support of the government on the ground with that work. So understanding that complexity in those urban areas, I think, is also something that's potentially quite different when you thought about these long-term, you know, camps that were in a different place.
Mary, we'd like to hire you as our policy and advocacy director. Totally true. You know, one of the things that we did as well last year, and this continuing on with another technology partner, is something similar where we worked on instant translation cards on a mobile phone. It wasn't just Syrians in that mixed flow of refugees. There are actually multiple languages that people need. So it was an overburdened police force and EU border force that did not have linguistic abilities. And ironically, that's one of the things about Mercy Corps, because we have such a wide global platform. Most of our officers in the Balkans had worked in other countries, so they immediately could talk to our staff in Afghanistan, say we need some Pashto words right away, or maybe it's a different dialect of Kurdish, and so it is that kind of flash thinking on what's required for that moment. Now, that actual innovation may only live another year or so, and then it's no longer really needed, and we got to move on again. So again, a part of that innovation isn't just the thing or the product, but I think the process and the way in which we problem solve together. So with Microsoft engineers or employees, you know, what do we need to do that, you know, may be a quick fix for now, but we need to iterate again next year because we may see another dynamic. So that's part of, I think, as well, the innovation challenge and opportunity is it's not just one thing at one time that may sit there Now, maybe a good German app that's dusted off sounds like a great
No,
reutilization.
just one piece, but just one piece.
So it's that iteration, I think, is very important innovation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when you think about where we were 1 year ago in learning about the crisis, we are in a very different place today, and it's largely because of the urbanization, I think, and the sense that we are now dealing with a very long-term situation.
Yes.
You both bring up a good point in the sense that the crisis has changed, and Mary, I mean, you speak very articulately about how that has changed, especially given your relatively recent introduction to these topics, and I wonder if there's you pointed out in one of the things that Microsoft brings to the table, and frankly Mercy Corps does as well, given your global footprint and your long history, but this notion of voice and advocacy, and how do we increase awareness of how significantly these issues have changed and the different challenges that we are facing, whether that's from a private sector perspective or from a nonprofit's perspective or from the local community. Global Washington's got a big footprint. We're trying to build a view in terms of Western Washington, or I should say all of Washington, but even the Northwest having a viewpoint and a perspective on this. Any suggestions as supporters and members of Global Washington how we as a community might think about using our collective voice to increase awareness around how we address these issues?
Well, there's no like magic way to do it. I think the more research we get, that's great. Mapping that to great storytelling. I mean, you have to. I mean, that's how you get people to pay attention. Is people can get numbed by the numbers, and always the great storytelling. I remember my very first introduction to this topic a year ago. I was at a particular conference, and again, this tells you how everything has changed. This nonprofit organization had volunteers going to meet refugees as they landed. And this woman arranged to have 100 pairs of night vision goggles shipped because that was the immediate need. That's just a little tiny story, but that story just stayed with me, because it was such a clear story of someone saying, what do you need right now? And how can I help right now? And it just sticks. It doesn't have big impact, but that story then leads you to the next thing and how you talk about it. I will say one thing that I know we're focused on the global topics today, but I don't think I can leave the stage without saying that we have in Washington State issues in Eastern Washington and issues on Native American lands that need addressing as well. And the results of the last election tell us that we need to ensure that we're not abandoning some of the great organizations and work that needs to be done in our own state and in our own country. So I think you'll see Microsoft do a little bit more outside of the urban areas in the United States, and frankly, even in places like Eastern Washington that don't have broadband the way we need to have broadband, and where frankly we also have migrants who don't have access to digital training. So you'll see us do a little bit more of that too.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think the audience has to change for that voice, who we're speaking with and who we're hearing and communicating with. I agree with Mary. This election cycle, along with other disruptions in what I think is kind of orderly politics, tells us something really big is going on, that people are tuning out or not. Perhaps we're not targeting our discussion with accurately. I spend a whole lot of my time in the same chambers in either Washington, Geneva, or New York, and it's the same people. So I'm feeling we're voicing, but it's the same people that are hearing it. So I agree with Mary. I think we have to think a little humbly now, a little humbler in terms of who is in the room with us. Civil society, honestly, actually is on the decline globally. Though you have very strong NGOs and very successful nonprofits, actually the space is declining. And in that void, there's a lot of other fragmentation and things like that. So for groups like Global Washington, I think is critical, because to aggregate up and also get out of the urban areas, get out of the Seattle area, it's pretty important, because otherwise we're not actually being as inclusive as we can. So I think there's a fundamental challenge with voice in the coming years. We see a lot of erosion with norms and standards in the international humanitarian world. And so just yelling at the politicians won't always work.
Yeah, one of the things I think has really been interesting over the last, mostly the last 6 months, and then thinking about, millennials, and everyone's reading these books about generational differences. And I am wondering whether or not millennials and others actually, in fact, I think they do, expect corporations to play a stronger role in the social good. And we've all known that corporations, that there is a role for corporations, that corporations must play. But in the last 2 or 3 years, I think with some of the sort of broad changes in government, maybe some of the countries turning a little bit more nationalistic, we see, for example, we see our own employees telling us that they want us to do more and to take positions on things that really 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think we would have seen our employees telling us to do that. It's not that they didn't have those views, it's they didn't expect the corporation to take the position. And we're seeing more of that. And I think that's going to be really interesting to think about advocacy going forward.
Yeah, especially in a world where we see the space for civil society decreasing. And I think certainly many of us in Western Washington were surprised by the outcomes of the last election.
Yeah.
But it's not just in the U.S., right? When we see some of these trends happening around the world, and I do think I agree with you. I think it'll really shape the conversation in years to come and how we think about it.
Yeah, I mean, you think about some of the things, just even in media, social media, that's happened, just in the last few weeks with, what's Facebook's role in managing a topic? And, corporations for a long time, and especially in the content space, my lawyer days, the laws have evolved in such a way that unless you're really doing a lot of monitoring, there is no legal responsibility to monitor whether news is news or fake news or terrorist content, or just recently you saw Microsoft, Facebook, Google come together to make statements about taking down truly, truly disturbing terrorist content. There is no legal obligation to do that, but there is a moral and a social one. And I think consumers and, again, employees are telling corporations that they expect more today. And, those two examples are just, they go well beyond legal. And
Sure. And
it's going to be interesting.
It is interesting to see how the opportunities that we have with technology can help shape the conversation that we're having at a global level, which in turn hopefully shapes the conversation and the impact that we can have on those that aren't being well served.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question too, because I think that there's tremendous promise for technology, and everyone talks about big data, but the ability to aggregate data together and use machine insights and business learning to identify correlations in ways that help to solve problems, that's all wonderful. But then, you often get this sense that there's a belief that technology can solve everything, and that's not true either. Right. That is really not true either. There are some things that are just really can't solve, but there are other things that, only people can solve.
That's right.
Only people can solve.
And I think that's, if we had another couple of hours, we could dive into, especially with the coming Fourth Industrial Revolution and the impact of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. What is that trade-off between technology as a tool and the human interaction?
Yeah.
And where do we need to think about skilling youth and whatnot? But I'm pretty sure if we dove into that conversation, Kristen would kick us off the stage before the end of the end of the time. Before we wrap, or as we wrap, let me ask you each a somewhat open-ended question for your closing comments. What do you want to see happen? I mean, we're over the next year. We're coming up on the new year. It's the time of year where we all reflect and think about what we want to accomplish in the next year. Mary, if we had this conversation again in another year, what would you hope would have changed and that we could be doing more effectively as a community?
Well, I'm thinking about sort of broader trends, so it's not a very specific comment, I think. I really do think that we need to think about what the future of jobs and work is in the 21st century, and how we can think about the role that technology plays to enable people to be continuous learners. Because whether we're talking about a steel worker who's become an Uber driver who now, is going to, or a truck driver and lose his or her job, or whether we're talking about someone, a young person in Syria, whatever skills that we probably provide will likely have to be updated every 7 or 8 years at the pace at which technology is changing. And so I hope that we're thinking more about the continuous learning throughout a young person's life or a middle-aged person's life in a way that we just haven't had, I think, either the time or things have come upon us in a very fast way. We haven't been able to really do that yet.
Michael?
Well, I'm back to that influence, impact, and innovation, and where are the opportunities for truly transformational change in some of those areas, be it in influence or voice and innovation. Certainly, I think for an NGO like Mercy Corps, it requires us to constantly feel we need to do better, right? To have a better world, we need to do better. But to do that, we need to actually have all three coming together, because alone, just project after project after project doesn't solve it. I agree with Mary. When you're looking at job skills for the youth, all these things require bringing together your influence and your impact. So those things keep us up at night, our leadership, and those things are what we dialogue with partners with Microsoft about.
That's great. Well, hopefully we'll have a chance in another year to look back and see the progress that we've made. In closing, let me thank both of you for being here this morning and really a fascinating conversation in terms of where we are and where we should be going. Join me in offering Mary and Michael a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
So as we move forward with our session, or the remainder of our program today, I'd like to invite Akhtar, where is Akhtar, to join us as we move into recognition of our annual Global Hero Award. And I think, Mary, you're going to stay here, but I think Michael and I are going to scoot out of the way. Thank you all.
Good morning. And there's actually a lot of place for those of you that are standing in the back to come up and fill up the seats. I'm Akhtar Badshah, and I'm the board vice chair of Global Washington. And on behalf of the board, I am honored to present the 2016 Global Hero Award to Bill Neukom. There are very few people in the world that can actually claim to have had such enormous impact and positive impact on multiple disciplines and industries. Bill is a lawyer. Mary is a lawyer. And he's the founder and CEO of the World Justice Project, an organization that is devoted to advancing the rule of law throughout the world. But Bill was the lead lawyer for Microsoft for 25 years. And in that space, he basically changed the way in which we actually think about corporate law, particularly as it related to an industry which was the software industry and IP and patent law, and really making it a way for many of us who actually use our intellect to really think about how you can actually then monetize that content. So Bill, thank you so much for that work that you've done. But in addition, he actually started Microsoft's philanthropic work. In 1983, he was given the task to figure out how to engage Microsoft's employees to give back into the community. And he started the Microsoft Employee Program and the Philanthropic Program. In 1983, there were 200 employees, and we started off with a very small amount. Last year, there were 45,000 employees of Microsoft that actually participated in the Employee Giving Program. And over the 30-plus years, Microsoft and its employees have invested over $1.3 billion into the community. The overall philanthropic program, you multiply that by a factor of 4 or 5, and that's really the investment that has been made, and it is all because of one individual who had the courage at that time to actually say, no, Bill, this is the other Bill. We are a small company, but we can still do it. So that's just an amazing impact. Then, of course, we kind of lost him to San Francisco, where he went and made another impact and becoming the CEO of the San Francisco Giants, and they won the World Series. So that's just, taking a whole different space. He obviously was elected the president of the American Bar Association, and it is there that he actually introduced the third impact that he's actually made in his career, which is starting the World Justice Project, where Bill has really focused on understanding through his travels that the rule of law is so important for every human being. And I'm just going to read a quote that he, said when he started the organization. I saw a fundamental impediment for economic, human, and social development in the absence of the rule of law. Everywhere you go, no matter the setting, a strong culture of the rule of law is foundational to a better quality of life. Without it, you cannot build strong institutions, people don't feel safe in their communities, corruption grows wide, investment dries up, and all across the board, people suffer. So the World Justice Project is an independent nonprofit organization founded in 2009. It has offices here in Seattle, Washington, D.C., and a regional office in Singapore. And what it does is that it works with individuals and leaders from both inside and outside of the justice sector to advance the rule of the law through original research and data, connecting and developing an active global network, and incubating practical on-the-ground programs that advance the rule of law. As many of you are familiar with, World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index, which is now considered the leading source for original data on the rule of law. The index measures a number of different things, but it actually works and relies on over 100,000 households and experts to provide this index, which is now being covered by BBC News, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Guardian, and 100 other outlets. We are actually at the Global Washington, we are honored that the World Justice Project allows us to bring in some key women leaders to talk at our breakfast, which is actually going to happen tomorrow in the morning, which, and Kiran Bedi last year, who was a police officer in the prisons and has actually completely rectified the institutional criminal justice systems in India. So we are greatly, appreciative of that too, Bill. So Bill has so often said that these issues matter to everyone. The rule of law is not just an issue for lawyers and judges to worry about. It matters to everyone who wants greater peace, justice, and economic and social progress. So please join me in honoring Bill Neukom with this award.
do not fall off, Sam.
He will not.
That's perfect. Thank you. Good. Well done. Thank you.
Let me officially put this.
Thank you, Mary.
Congrats.
Thank you. Well, good morning. First of all, congrats to the Claps for what they've organized and brought you here to learn and forward. Paula and Bill are remarkable leaders. And this is one of several of their initiatives, but what a demonstration of the power of a good idea to look out on this audience. And what a generous introduction. A mindful person would say thank you and with Sam's help get off this stage. But I think I've been allocated a few minutes just to say a few things which I hope might be of some use. What a powerful panel we just heard. And I understand that the theme is partnerships between business, if you will, and NGOs. And it's a very important topic, and there couldn't be two better examples of partners in that space than Mercy Corps and Microsoft. And the things that can be done in those combinations, those collaborations, are quite amazing and give us all hope, I think. And we need more of that, certainly. And coming out of this conference, there will be, I think, more good planning and then execution and more productivity because of those collaborations. So good for Global Washington for seizing on such an important and such a potent theme, and good for all of you for being here and being a part of it and for what you will do to carry out the promise of those partnerships. We live in interesting times, do we not? Somewhat almost historic times, I think it's fair to say. This country has been sort of a beacon, has it not, for marginalized folk all around the world. And that beacon has been electrified, I think, by government activities and by activities by the private sector. We are entering an administration, we hope not an era, I hope not an era, where we might expect less of a beacon, less energy going into that beacon of hope and equity around the world from the federal government than we have in the past. That's worrisome on the one hand, and it seems to me that in light of these developments, that there is forged an opportunity for the civil society change agents to step up and do even more. The checks and balances won't come from within the federal government. They have to come from us. Civil society has to become sort of a bulwark to protect people against government mischief or worse. So it's in some ways the best of times for us. Before we turn our backs on the federal government, we should all pause and be reminded that when Jimmy Carter, in his first week in office, wanted to go across the street and take a walk in the park, he was stopped just as he left his desk chair and told that he'd have to go down this hallway to that elevator, where he'd meet his entourage and go down that elevator to this level and out that door and into this vehicle. And he realized that when he wasn't sitting behind his desk, he didn't have much mobility. The bureaucrats were in charge. And I say bureaucrats in a very fond and appreciative way, not the way bureaucrats, this is a secret, I'm going to say it here and now, they run the government. And they're amazing people in many ways and unsung. They run the government. So whether it's disassembling this or changing that direction, it is a proverbial nuclear, I'm afraid, aircraft carrier. And there can be somebody at the helm and there can be new policy expressions, but at the end of almost every day, it's the committed lifer bureaucrats who make the engines run. And so we need to keep talking with them and seeing what they might be willing to do, even under cover of a different ideology than the one we've been used to in the main for the past several years. But then there's another piece of government we shouldn't give up on. I know I'm off the theme of partnerships between business and us, but let's put it in a broader context. There's state and local government. And there's some quite remarkable, very far-reaching, I submit, activities that state and local governments can take at our urging by way of advancing humanity and equity. And let me, if I may, once a lawyer, often a lawyer, quote from a much smarter lawyer than I, a fellow named Louis Brandeis, who served on our Supreme Court, who said in a 1932 case the following: a state may, if its citizens choose, serve as a laboratory and try social and economic experiments. State government as a laboratory. Just think about some of the issues that we care about right here and how we could find solutions that might in turn find footing in other countries, become quite global. What about immigration? What about shelter? What about nutrition? Can we do some things in the Great Pacific Northwest that might be exportable in a very humble way, not imposing upon people in a colonial way, but that might find traction in other countries, in developing countries? So whether it's working with and listening to and persuading the bureaucrats in the federal government, or whether it is encouraging the leaders and the bureaucrats of state and local governments, I think there is still opportunity for us to work with governments in advancing civilization around this world. The World Justice Project is founded on a premise, which is that if you want to live and work in a community of peace and of opportunity and of equity, you've got to have a thing called the rule of law as a foundation. We respectfully assert that we are surrounded by fundamentally important causes. We're a little different because we are foundationally important and we're kind of underneath. We're not better than, but we're different from some of the other causes that are being supported by you good folks and folks like you in this region and in this country and in this world. Because without the rule of law, if you live in a capricious, lawless, even a violent, corrupt community, it's really hard to get stuff done. You can't have very good oral hygiene if you're a dentist. You can't discover an education in a durable way, can you, in a dangerous place where kids have to dodge gunfire to get to school? You can't have a very vibrant art community and do the stuff that makes life worth living, to say nothing of a sound, open, accountable government, to say nothing of an opportunity, an environment where businesses can employ people and create opportunities. Everybody's affected by it, and very few folk understand that. So we are evangelists around the proposition of the rule of law, and to show you that what we're doing, that subject deserves attention, right here at Global Washington, I will cite to a pretty smart guy. In 1948, at the time of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, unfortunately, this fellow, Albert Einstein, said the following. He was not a lawyer. Quote, "We must learn the difficult lesson. We must learn the difficult lesson that an endurable future of humanity will be possible only if decisions are based on law and justice and not on self-righteous power." Think about that for a minute. Let me read it just one more time. We must learn the difficult lesson that an endurable future of humanity. He had a way with words as well as with numbers, to Mary's point about human beings and technology. An endurable future of humanity will be possible only if decisions are based on law and justice and not on self-righteous power. You can take out the self-righteous and just say power. Justice, not power. The rule of law is not so capacious or elusive a concept as it may seem. No eye rolls, please, out there. We're not curing polio here. We think about it at the project in just four simple, but I hope clear, universal principles. This is not liberal democracy. We are not exporters of the American way of organizing a government. We recognize that our government is a 240-year experiment. Lucky us, kind of, so far, warts and all. There's nothing guaranteed about the durability of liberal democracies, and they're not necessarily always the best model. The question is whether the government of your community is one which meets the four universal principles, or some universal principles. Our four are these. Are public and private actors held accountable? Some private actors are as powerful as some small governments of small countries, so you better include private actors with public actors. So it's not just the relationship between the governed and the government, it's the relationship between business competitors, between neighbors, those kinds of relationships. Held accountable under what? A lot of accountability in apartheid South Africa and in the Third Reich, lots of accountability, but under a very wrong-headed set of rules and laws and regulations and norms. So the accountability has to be under a set of just laws, rules, regulations. And by just, we mean, at the very least, protection of the individual, the first responsibility of the state, which is to protect the individual. And secondly, some system of economics where jobs are created and some wealth can be earned. I don't mean, stock option wealth. I just mean enough to have a family stay together and have kids go to school and have shelter and clean water and reasonable nutrition and the like. And thirdly, what we call some core human rights. I think that a clean environment ought to be a human right, but I can't get everybody in this room to agree with me on that. But I can get you to agree with me. I think that religion, expression, and assembly are core human rights. They're all in the Declaration, along with some others, but we certainly focus on those as a minimum. So just laws to us means some protection for the individual, some economic system, environment, and most importantly, these core human rights. And the third universal principle is the adoption of those, again, laws, rules, regulations, norms, customary notions, cultural notions. Those rules of engagement, those rules of community, if you will, they have to be adopted, administered, and enforced in an open fashion. Folk need to know who's making the rules and what they are. Folk need to understand where they go to get that license, to deal with that citation. That's where most of us come in contact with a law. We don't bring lawsuits or change policy through legislation. We get a permit or we deal with a citation. And finally, enforcement, whether it be military, police, courts. Those processes, in a way that makes sense to the community in question, need to be open so people can see what's going on in the government. And I can't resist, not transparent. I don't want you to see through them. I want you to see them. So open. And finally, some form of what we call disciplined dispute resolution, however formal or informal. If it's a judge in a wig and a lawyer in robes, okay. If it works, it works. If it is an elder resolving a dispute between neighbors, terrific. Sometimes it's quicker, it's cheaper, it's decisive. And the test of any sort of dispute resolution system, seems to me, is at the end of that process, however formal or informal, is the loser of the controversy able to move on with her life and her work? If she is, it's been successful. If she isn't, it's not adequate. So 4 universal principles: accountability, just laws, openness, and dispute resolution in an impartial, on the merits basis. That's not too many things for us to remember as we go forward. And to the extent that we are able to measure performance in now 113 countries, adherence to that notion of the rule of law, we think that is valuable data and is the basis for people to make their own decisions about where they want to intervene and influence the expansion of the rule of law in their communities, all towards the goals of peace and opportunity and equity. So thank you for your this honor. This is tall cotton to be on the list with a Bill Gates or a Roy Prosterman by an organization founded by Paula and Bill Clapp. I am humbled by this. It won't change the way my kids look at me, but it might affect the grandkids. Thank you for what you do and what you will do. Onward.
So, Bill, I want to thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for this optimistic and inspiring comments. We all need a little optimism these days. So thank you, and thank you for all you've done to bring rule of law to the world. I'm Will Poole. I'm a long-term board member of Global Washington, and I am the founder of a global impact investment firm here called Capria. We're a member of Global Washington and recently a beneficiary that we found a great new operations director with the Global Washington Jobs Board. So I recommend making use of this organization. You'll find great people around here. I have the privilege and honor of introducing the Fast Pitch session today. This is one that's been going for a number of years now, and it's proven to be a very popular way for us to expose some of our member organizations very quickly to all of you. Now, I've been the coach of this program for the last couple of years, but we thankfully got an upgrade this year. And my friend Daniel Kranzler, who's one of Seattle's best loved and most capable pitch coaches, has helped these 6 organizations get ready to present to you. I urge you to pay attention. If you blink a couple of times, you will miss something important. You're going to get 6 2-minute pitches right in a row. And they are competing really for only one thing, which is your attention. Because what they want to do is to intrigue you enough such that after the sessions, during a break or at lunch, that you'll come up to them and say, hey, I really like what you're doing, and I'd like to talk to you about X, or I want to connect you to Y. And making connections is really what we're about here, building partnerships. And so this is our way to very efficiently use your time and help you learn about some of the great things happening from Global Washington members. So without further ado, the first one may come up here. Here we go.
Thank you. I'm excited to show you what Podavita is doing to bring safe water to people who need it using data-driven feedback. The problem we're addressing is that almost 700 million people don't have access to safe water. Over $1 billion is spent on this problem annually, but existing household solutions are used as little as 5% of the time. Let's be clear about what that means. If an aid organization distributes $20 worth of purifiers, $19 are simply thrown away unused. So that means the social impact per dollar is terrible of existing solutions. They're too expensive. To fix this, we have to focus on behavior change. Our solution is the smart solar purifier. It's very easy to use. You fill the 10-liter capacity bag with water, press the start button, and leave it in the sun until a red blinking light turns green. When you see the green light, that means we've measured enough UV exposure from the sun to know that the bacteria and viruses are dead and the water's safe to drink. This is a reusable and durable product, and it's cost competitive with existing solutions at $50. But on top of that, every unit electronically records its own usage, which is how we're able to achieve and know that we've achieved over 60% correct usage rates in the field. That's a number that turns heads at the 8 organizations we're talking to because it's the single most important driver of cost effectiveness. Let me show you how we close behavioral feedback loops using data. When field staff visit a household for follow-up, which they already do, now they're able to download the usage history from the purifiers right in front of them. They can use that accurate data to close the feedback loop with end users instead of using self-reported usage. The data they capture is GPS tagged and sent back to us for analysis. Then we develop automated daily reports that show field staff their own activity as well as end user behavior. We send similar reports to their management and to the home office. And ultimately, we see this as a tool for bringing accountability and transparency to the industry of global aid, something donor organizations are increasingly demanding. We're a for-profit, and we're looking for additional foundation and NGO partners. Please come talk to me if you'd like to learn more.
Hi, my name is Leah Spellman, and I'm with Days for Girls. What's the one thing that connects education, gender, economic empowerment, and water and sanitation? Would you be surprised if I said menstruation? Access to menstrual hygiene management solutions is an important way to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every woman and girl. With solutions that are affordable, environmentally friendly, and sustainable, girls can stay in school and women can go to work. Multiply this times millions for a country, and suddenly these kits have a very real economic and social impact. Having access to these things is important, and yet we don't talk about it. Maybe here, but generally. We don't talk about it. We're embarrassed and ashamed, and because of that, millions of women and girls get left behind. Since 2008, Days for Girls has been breaking through stigma to reach over 400,000 women and girls in 100 countries. How do we do this? Through partnership. At the core of Days for Girls model are partnerships with individuals, companies, governments, and other NGOs to raise awareness and help us reach more women and girls. As part of this, we have over 760 chapters and teams in the US and beyond. In thinking about partnership this year, we turned to a company in Seattle that could fearlessly help us spread the word to reach more women and girls. Enter Core Power Yoga. We held 3 glow-in-the-dark flow and glow classes with black lights and glow paint. People got to class a few minutes early and painted themselves and their friends. All proceeds from classes went to Days for Girls. People had a blast. It looked great and was an awesome way for us to spread awareness. Core Power loved the event, and we're currently talking with them about ways we can scale. We also took away important lessons learned about messaging that we'll be able to apply for the future. At the end of the day, we were really happy with this partnership, and it was a big win-win. And there's so much room for partnership in addressing this issue. So come find me today during the conference, and we can talk about how you can be an instrumental part of scaling Days for Girls programs in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Bartow-Gowron. Thrive's mission is building shared prosperity in vulnerable global communities. We do this by making pay-it-forward loans to small businesses so that they can grow and create jobs. Rather than repay their loans to Thrive, they repay through in-kind donations of products or job training to local people in need. By paying their loans forward, local entrepreneurs and not NGOs become the change makers in their communities. Rural Vietnamese women do not have many opportunities to generate income, much less receive a loan to grow their business. Meet Minh Nguyen on the left. Production for her mushroom growing business was sporadic due to fluctuations in outdoor growing conditions and a lack of modern equipment. So Thrive partnered with Minh and made her a pay-it-forward loan of $10,000 to purchase a cooling system to grow mushrooms indoors. This allowed her to expand her business enough to hire 22 more women. And to repay her loan, Min trains other women in the mushroom growing process and provides them with all of the supplies needed to grow mushrooms at home. They'll then sell those mushrooms back to Min, allowing them to generate more income and to provide for their families. Min has been so inspired that she is committed to training women long after her Thrive loan is repaid. We at Thrive believe that shared prosperity will create a more cooperative and inclusive world for us all. So imagine what could happen if more small business financing was tied to a measurable social return. Join us. If you want to have measurable and clear impact for your funds, this is where to invest. So find me today and let's talk, or you can visit us online at thrive.org. And that's Thrive with 2 eyes. Thank you.
What if I told you that the limits of your organization are not the resources it has, but the friends that you haven't yet made? I'm Tim Hickory, and I work at Construction for Change. Let me tell you about some of the friends that we have made. As a nonprofit construction company, we build infrastructure that alleviates poverty in the world's most under-resourced areas. In 2014, our friend Julie Lewis, a 30-year survivor of HIV and mother to Ryan of Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, founded the 3030 Project as an initiative of Construction for Change to bring healthcare access to those who need it most. Now, when 3030 was launched, we knew through past experience that we couldn't do it alone. We would need some friends. We also knew that the need to pool our shared resources has not only become a tool for survival, but also an excellent means to achieve shared outcomes through multiple stakeholders. So what does this model look like in reality? Well, in India, 70% of its population is at risk to preventable death due to the lack of access to healthcare. Through infrastructure and technology, we are bringing affordable healthcare access to the doorsteps of these communities because of the friendships we have made with the government, nonprofits, and corporations. In phase 1 of 5, our volunteer project managers are working alongside local construction crews in the rural town of Ragagar to build facilities that will support the health of generations to come in India. Because that's the end game. Well, it's great for me to stand up here and talk about how maximizing the collective power of our shared resources as the most efficient means to solving big problems. The true impact is in the lives chains of the friends we meet along the way. So here's my call to action. Today, our work has impacted over 1 million lives through the friendships we have made, and we're looking for strategic nonprofit partners, investors, and consultants to help us not only grow our organization, but together continue this important life-changing work. So if that's you, come see us before the end of the day. We can't wait to meet the greatest resource our organization doesn't yet have.
Good morning. My name is Willa. So here's the thing. After the elections, things changed for us, and so has my presentation. So if you want to hear about our partnership with Lunette, check me out during a break. You know who Planned Parenthood is, and here's what we do. We have been here for 100 years, and during that time, we have provided critical care to millions of women. What you might not know is that your local Planned Parenthood here supports sexual and reproductive health care across the globe. Now, more than ever, our tagline, care no matter what, is at the heart of what we do. We care about LGBT inclusivity and eliminating gender-based violence. We care about addressing racism, and we care about creating a culture of consent. These past few weeks have asked us all to focus on no matter what, both here and around the globe. And our partners care about it too. If I am afraid that I may be deported, I'm less likely to access services. If I'm afraid to come out, I may not tell my doctor what's really happening. And if I have to go great distances, I may not be able to afford my abortion. These next 4 years are critical to us and to our global partners. I'm asking you to join me. And if you see the connection between racial equity and sexual health, between strict gender norms and violence in our communities, if you see the connection between fearing deportation and accessing care, then join me. I'm here all day. Come find me. Let's find new ways to partner. It's time to act no matter what. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Romulo. He's 15 years old. I met him last month in Colombia. He wants to be a doctor. Romulo would wake up at 4 a.m. every morning to walk 10 kilometers to school every day. That's over 2.5 hours. He received his bicycle last month and now rides just half an hour to school. The Mabisi program is a successful partnership between World Bicycle Relief and Colombia's largest soft drink company, Postobon. The program aims to improve education quality and performance in the rural areas of Colombia using bicycles as a transformational tool. Mobility and the barrier of distance is often overlooked in the challenge of development, including education. In rural Colombia, the average distance walking is 6 kilometers, or over an hour and 20 minutes. To date, the Mabisi program has delivered almost 3,000 bicycles into 30 rural schools. These strong bicycles are designed by World Bicycle Relief for the challenging conditions found in Colombia. The program includes deep engagement with the schools and the community for sensitization and beneficiary selection. For Postobon, the Mabisi program is an excellent alignment of community engagement and brand. And the program metrics have seen impressive results. Absence rates of students have decreased by 80%, and the average time travel has reduced by 60%. World Bicycle Relief is committed to helping people conquer the challenge of distance, achieve independence, and thrive. For the past 11 years, we've delivered over 330,000 bicycles and trained over 1,200 field mechanics in 18 developing countries. We believe corporate partnerships like the Mabisi Project are impactful models of development. And the story continues. Diana is 16 years old and in the 8th grade. Her family lives on the edge of a banana plantation. A local bus is often overcrowded or out of service. With her bicycle, Diana is able to attend school regularly and feel safer. Looking ahead, Diana has big goals. One day she would like to go to law school and become a judge. As Mabisi's first recipients, Diana is riding towards her future with the power of bicycles. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you all. That takes a lot of courage to get up here and do these fast pitches, so great job, all of you. So, off to a good start here in our morning plenary. I also wanted to thank Lauren and Michael and Mary for the morning conversation. So one other thing that's become a tradition here at a Global Washington Conference is that we do shout outs to some of our members that you all submitted. So I'm gonna intersperse these throughout the day, and they have 4 themes. They're awards, anniversaries, advances of programs, and action. So we're gonna start with a couple of awards that I'm going to read out. We're also gonna be tweeting these, so you'll see those on our tag board. But just briefly, Awamaki is the Global Washington member, and they're a finalist in the National Geographic World Travel Legacy Award for their work with women in the Andes to participate in the modern economy without leaving their village or their way of life. Second is Landesa, who's actually right now ranked number 8 in the top 500 NGOs in the world. With their work this year, they've helped 8.1 million people to gain secure land rights. Next is One by One. They initiated this year a mayoral proclamation on behalf of all of Seattle nonprofits in recognition of November 29th, 2016 for Giving Tuesday. Thank you for your advocacy on that. Also, UW just recently received a $210 million gift from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their population health building that we're all anxiously awaiting for. Lastly, we have Village Reach and Planned Parenthood of the Great Northwest and Hawaiian Islands. They won recently the 2016 Dreams Initiative Challenge, and they will be collaborating to develop new approaches to reduce new HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women in Africa. So congratulations to all of you for these. So next we will have a short break, and then we'll go into our breakout sessions. There are 5 of them that you get to choose from, and I'm sorry I'm making you choose. And then after that, we have a lunch, and I want to explain that on the back of your name tag is your table number. The lunch will be back in here, so please find your table quickly. And our lunch presentation is about global development post-election. And I should have realized this morning, especially having 2 lawyers on stage, that the election would have come up this morning. And thank you, Willa, for throwing away your whole presentation and addressing that. So that is something we're going to be talking about throughout the day. I also encourage people to visit the Marketplace of Ideas throughout the day that we have. And also, if you have not downloaded the app we have for this, download it through WOVA, and that's a way that you can connect with everyone who's here at the conference. You can send in-app messages to see if you can meet up here at the conference. So with that, we'll have a 15-minute break, and then make your way to your breakout sessions. Thank you all very much.